And again, sticking with the concept of maybe some buzzwords, if I think of things like blockchain and secure folders, potentially crypto, if I think of the bucket industry and some of the companies we've been speaking to, we might think of fintech as maybe that world that those technologies operate in. Clearly, with things like challenger banks, new currencies, all those sorts of things, the regulatory landscapes are really constantly shifting in that area. So how do you think companies can leverage this type of technology within fintech or fintech companies themselves to stay ahead of the changes, maintain compliance and balancing innovation on top of that, right? Sounds like an impossible task.
Yeah, it's incredibly difficult when we have these new resources, these new platforms. How do we manage them? And it's very similar to the traditional. If we track back into the not so distant past, how did we deal with virtualization when it first came about? How did we deal with containers when it first came about? The answer is, if we're being brutally honest, quite badly. We adopt these new technologies. We are technologists generally. I know there's a lot of businesses out there that consider themselves businesses, but all businesses have massive IT resources. So there's a lot of techies out there. And let's be brutally honest, lots of techies are very interested in the next big thing, the next shiny thing. Look at what happened with VMware, for example. VMware came along, allowed you to more effectively use your platforms, more effectively time slice your CPU, etc., and that came up from test dev into production before anyone really realized it. Before you know it, you've got virtual machines in production. How are you managing them? Actually, that was one of my jobs many years back, working out how to manage them. The answer is really badly. You end up with a very poorly managed environment that you have to claw back. And this is what's happened with a lot of cloud workloads. People spin stuff up in the cloud. The resources run, people haven't got control over them, you end up with an overspend. Similar with Kubernetes. You've got these Kubernetes workloads, they've come from test dev, they're now in production because some vendor or other requires them or has given them to you. Then you need to work out how you manage them, how you keep them under control, how you protect them, how you secure them, etc., etc. I think we need to be cognizant of the fact that there are new platforms all the time, and we make the same mistakes over and over again and have to claw our way back. I think we need to be a little bit more forward thinking when it comes to anything new in the environment, and make sure, I know it's a barrier to adoption, but make sure it's secure, make sure it's compliant, make sure that we are in control before these things end up in production environments. Because I've spent a lot of my time in the past X number of years clawing back understanding, visibility, management, performance, governance, compliance of newer platforms, because we've done it back to front. We've deployed and then we've managed. I think a forward-looking mindset that encompasses security, governance, compliance, management, visibility, etc., is important. That's maybe my hobby is getting companies back on track there. So it's maybe my soapbox moment where I say, manage it. Come on. It is a difficult thing, but also it's been a pain point for huge customers over the past 10, 15, 20 years.
Absolutely, and no signs of going anywhere. The amount of complexity in the world, you just have to open a newsfeed looking at economics and all the rest, politics.
Same conversation. I was having this conversation with a colleague, ex-boss of mine, fairly recently over a coffee, and we were talking about some of the most recent innovations going on out in the world, and bemoaning the fact that some of the technologies we've worked on 15, 20 years previously would be absolutely ideal. They're not trendy anymore. I'm not going to go into detail, but they're not trendy anymore. But if you apply the basic tenets that we were applying 15, 20 years ago to some of these more modern platforms, you'd have great visibility, understanding. You could make some very interesting business decisions based upon what is essentially old principles and old technology. And it's not fashionable anymore. And I'm not fashionable anymore. But these things, the solutions that we're looking for have quite often previously been created. We don't think the older solutions map to the newer technologies. Sometimes they don't, but sometimes the old principles still apply.
Yeah, well, I'm a big fan of the old fundamentals and principles. My space is marketing. I mean, spent 20 years in B2B marketing, and I can tell you lots of new, shiny, fangled things come along. Obviously, AI is really disrupting things, but the basic marketing principles and concepts, everybody gets caught up in some of the futuristic, cutting-edge stuff, and forgets all about the basic strategy, the building blocks, driving it forward in a coherent, cohesive way. So I can absolutely relate to that. I think on the subject of that and almost standing out, there seems to be a lot of market saturation. So I'll give you an example. I went to a cybersecurity trade show recently, and when you have 20 scale-up cybersecurity companies all offering pen tests, pen testing is their standout solution, you stand there and you look at them and you go, well, how do I tell any of these apart? They've all got slick branding, they all seem to have the same messaging, they all seem to deliver the same solution. So I think it's probably safe to say in this day and age, SaaS market saturation is absolutely a thing. So how do you think small tech companies can actually focus on things like niche solutions to stand out? And what kind of technical innovations are there that could help build this unique competitive advantage to stand out from the crowd?
I think it's from a technical perspective, it's very difficult to differentiate yourselves. There are, the technologies available to you are, manyfold. It depends what you're talking about, obviously, in terms of the services that are being delivered or offered. I think, coming back to basic principles, or coming back to customization in terms of services, I think, to be honest, there's probably a people element there. We talk a lot about technology. We talk about how we technically differentiate solutions. In a lot of cases, and I'm sure you can sympathise here. Some of these technologies that we've worked with in the past are very similar. They solve a similar problem in a similar way. There are obviously nuances, but fundamentally, if you're looking at X and Y, there's probably some minor differentiation. But from a technical perspective, a knife's a knife, or a fork's a fork, or a solution's a solution. I think there's a lot to be said for the people side of things, taking what you can do with your IP, your staff, your knowledge base, and creating, mining that and creating solutions based on how you personalize, how you address your customer requirements, what you can do. And I mentioned people and technology. Obviously, there's a process bit in there as well. Again, comes back to haunt me, some of my process consulting back in the day. But there are things that we can do that aren't just technology based that can add significant value to our customers. So I think, yes, there are obviously widgets, technologies that we can play with, but equally, don't forget, you have some of the best resources you generally have as an organization are your people, and your people have some significant skills. I think there's quite often an overlooked resource there, which is ask your staff. What do they think they could do better? What do they think is comprises a great solution? I know the board may have different, or C-levels may have different opinions, but the grassroots generally have a very, very good opinion as to what makes things work. And look at the likes of Ford, Volkswagen, etc., on their production lines, asking the staff, how can we do this better? In some cases, there's a lot of noise. In other cases, there's the thing that saves you, £1,000 a minute or an hour or whatever it is. It's there's a people process side. We tend to over-rotate on technology because we're technologists. Don't forget the other elements. It's powerful.
Nice, yeah, I really like that. And that customer feedback, that feedback on the ground, people at the coalface, I think it's critical. Sometimes gets forgotten depending on the nature of the company and how they're looking to scale up. Maybe it's finances and tech first, but I think those nuances can really help people stand out and stand apart.
Yeah, it's one of the things that I've done quite a lot of, taking field and customer feedback, feeding it back up into product teams, into the senior levels, fighting our corner. Quite frequently, I'm the EMEA voice, the voice of Europe, Middle East, Africa, rather than the US. And having worked for some very big organisations in the past, sometimes different regions, different countries, different parts of the world have very different requirements when it comes to technology, cloud providers, operating systems. So yeah, there's nuance that sometimes gets missed when you are headquartered in a certain part of the world. I mean, it's equally true for European companies that operate in other parts of the world. I think sometimes we need to just focus down a little bit on what the differences are, and at least consider. I know everyone wants a one-size-fits-all. T-shirt size is a popular. Yeah, I always think the 80-20 rule applies there. 80% standard, 20% custom, and make sure you're customizing it correctly for your customers.